Welcome to the Achieve Workplace Culture podcast, where Wendy, Chris, and Eric explore the latest news stories, their work, and trends for creating and maintaining a healthy workplace culture.
Welcome to the Achieve Workplace Culture podcast. I'm Eric Stutzman, one of your co-hosts, together with Wendy Lowen and Chris Downey. In a word, how are you feeling about the podcast today?
Pumped. I'm feeling pumped.
Curious.
Good word, Wendy. Today, we're going to be looking at and exploring a metaphor. And the metaphor comes from a t-shirt of all places. A while back, I was with a family member who was wearing a t-shirt and it said, "Never blame the lettuce" on it. And he looked at me and he said, "Eric, aren't you curious about my t-shirt?" And I said, "Well, okay, tell me about your t-shirt." And then, in typical fashion, he said, "Well, why don't you Google it?" And so I did. I Googled it, and I came up with a metaphor that comes from the teaching of somebody named Thich Nhat Hanh that really struck me. In fact, we liked the metaphor so much when you and I co-wrote a book with another author, Randy Greaser, and we titled our book with the metaphor for "Don't Blame the Lettuce." And here's what it says. The basics are this. If you plant lettuce in a garden and that lettuce fails to thrive, you never blame the lettuce. Instead, you look at the conditions in the garden, and if the lettuce needs more fertilizer, you add fertilizer or more sunlight or water or too much water, and you try to figure out about the conditions of the garden that the lettuce is growing in, but you never blame the lettuce. And yet, when our friends and family members and colleagues fail to thrive, we often blame them rather than looking at the conditions. And that has stuck with me. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a really apt metaphor for thinking about culture. And that's what this podcast is all about, right? Is workplace culture. What are we doing when it comes to workplace culture? And I guess I'm curious to start us off, if either of you have a reflection about how has that metaphor and way of thinking about things shifted what you're doing as a leader, as a consultant, as a trainer, when you think about workplace culture and the people you work with?
Yeah, well, I'd say for me, it shifted everything. I think when you share that example of, if you're a gardener, you plant lettuce, it's very obvious. You wouldn't blame the lettuce. You'd tend to the conditions. But every time you share it with someone, they say, "But yeah, how do we handle our workplace?" Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's caused me to rethink what I think I know or what I thought I knew about performance, well-being, or even engagement in the workplace. It's really caused me to realize that this is not necessarily an individualistic pursuit. There are contributing factors, just like there are for the lettuce, just like there are in life. And this has opened me up to realizing that there is reason for the behavior that we're concerned with. The concern is real, but what's driving the behavior is a story we need to figure out if we really want to get through. So it's shifted everything, how I view the workplace, and honestly outside of the workplace as well, what I'm seeing going on in our communities and around our world.
Yeah, I would very much concur with what Chris just said. And I think the idea of "don't blame the lettuce" also connects to shifting judgment to curiosity. Mm-hmm. And at Achieve, we talk a lot about shifting to curiosity and how important that is. And it is the antidote to blame. Right. And so rather than blaming people, we should be curious about what's leading to that behavior. Yeah. And I like what you said, Chris. It's not just about how we are at work, but also in our social relationships with our family, our friends. Curiosity really does promote strong interactions.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you're saying that, because I was coming out of COVID. One of the first in-person engagements I did went to do a keynote with a large group. There's about 300 participants in this session. We were talking about this very idea about not blaming the lettuce. And when we often talk about this, we say, yes, the presenting problem could be what we're concerned with, but what are some contributing factors that might be leading to that? And often there's a root cause, even below those contributing factors. And as I was sharing this, someone spoke up and said, "Okay, Chris, this sounds good, but what am I supposed to do when someone's lying to me?" Mm-hmm. I said, "Okay, can we talk about that?" And they said, "Sure." I said, "First question, do you know for certain that they're not being honest, that they're telling a lie?" And she said, "Yes, absolutely." I said, "Okay, I would be curious about what's happening in your organization that an employee would feel the need to tell a lie versus the truth.
Interesting, yeah.
And I'll give this person credit. They kind of sank into their chair. And I was like, yeah, because my bet is that person isn't always dishonest. And if I think about myself, I've definitely told a lie when I felt unsafe.
Yes.
Right? And this is the crux of what we're talking about, that if we judge on behavior alone, we're going to be off base. We're literally guessing. Yeah. And there could be something that's contributing to it, even if it's negative. Go ahead.
Well, and what we do is we fail to look at the root. So if we just say, this person's lying and that's not good, and therefore we need to do something about that, some sort of punishment gets meted out, and we're clear we can't lie in this workplace, but we haven't addressed the conditions. So good for us, we've slapped somebody's hand for lying, but bad for us because we haven't examined ourselves and said, why does this person feel unsafe in the first place? What do we need to do about that? Because chances are other people are going to want to bend the truth sometimes, right?
Yep.
That question about who's at fault right here is, I think, a really problematic one, right? Who did something wrong so that this thing happened, right? Who's at fault, right?
Yes, and even that question in and of itself, I think you're calling into question that that's not the best way for us to interact with any kind of concern or issue we want to address. And I think if you're talking about not blaming and moving to curiosity, we often think of that as a mental exercise. But I know, Chris, we were talking several months ago about the etymology of the word curiosity, and it actually comes from the word cure in Latin, cura, which means to care, to give attention to. So rather than blaming, we want to care, we want to give attention to, and we want to figure out, yes, what are the root causes that we can address, but we do it not just from the place of a mental exercise, but from a place of real, genuine care and authenticity.
Yeah, I love that. And that was a game changer for me as well, to hear that one, Wendy. And I think, Eric, as you bring this up, we have a natural, at least in our society, we want the black and white, the right and the wrong, the obvious things, because it gives us a sense of control, that we understand a situation. But two things can be right in the same context. We can't get there if we don't care and are curious. So I think what we're kind of up against is what we've been taught through movies, through what we're witnessing, what we see in society is right and wrong, good and bad, right? But that's not necessarily the way we operate. So we actually need to push against some more conventional perspective when we get into our workplaces, and we should be doing it outside of our workplaces as well, but we're talking about within our workplaces, to go, okay, let's truly care, even though they may have done something that on the surface appears to be wrong. They just were, right? That's all it is. They just were, and we just need to figure out what I'm concerned. And I would say this operates on the positive side too. We create narrative about people's good behavior all the time.
Yeah, sure.
That's true.
Right?
We do.
Right? But there's less risk if we create a narrative about it. But we're forever doing that. But the reality is we don't necessarily know what's driving that good behavior.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
No, we don't. Well, we can make guesses. Right?
That's exactly it.
Unless we're
guessing.
explicit about what's happening.
Right.
We don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, we've done a lot of thinking about this. We've done some actual research, or we have read a lot of research into that. I know, Wendy, you think a lot about that. Have you come across anything interesting in the research out there, or what other people are saying about curiosity and its effect on the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, curiosity is about, like you said, looking for the root causes. It often is expressed by asking questions rather than just assuming your perspective is correct. And we know that preschoolers ask a lot of questions, about 100 plus a day. By the time we get to our work environment, that's really not happening. People aren't curious about their work, and they're not curious about how their interactions, the interactions between each other, are impacting their work. And I came across a study by Francesco Gina, and she looked at over 3,000 employees and interviewed both the employees and the leaders. And the leaders all gave assent to, like they said, yes, curiosity is really, really important. But 70% of the employees said there isn't time for me to ask questions, that they're seen as a barrier to getting my work done. And so people pull back. They stop asking those questions. And I mean, we hear about the importance of questioning, shifting from curiosity, blame. Brene Brown talks about it's like a leader's fundamental role is to shift away from blame. And you do that through curiosity. And yet in our workplaces, we often just jump to blame. We don't hold back and go, oh, what's really going on? What are those conditions? And then can I add one more thing there?
Yeah.
And so the positive spin-offs for curiosity in the workplace are, first of all, people make better decisions. There's less conflict interpersonally. Teams interact better and are more efficient and effective and more satisfied with their teams. And there's also more innovation. So there's this duality of you do better work, you get a better product, and you feel better.
Right.
And enjoy the people you're working with if you can be a little bit curious and move away from blame.
It's interesting what you shared there, Wendy. I really appreciate that. And the data backs it up. We're naturally curious. You said that in preschoolers were asking these questions, and by the time we're in the workforce, we're not. So it's kind of trained out of us. And then if we are so it's our natural state is to actually be curious.
Right.
And if we are creating work environments that doesn't create opportunity or time to be curious, the work environment is actually going against what we naturally want to do and need to do. So that's there is a contributing factor right now to us not doing well in the workplace. If I am not given an opportunity to be curious, I'm not really given an opportunity to really be how I am as a human. It's something we would all share.
Yeah.
Right. So I think this is even fundamental. But I also wonder about that. There isn't time to be curious. I don't know that I believe that. I think it is an easy out to say that's the case. There's always time for curiosity. It can be done moment to moment. It doesn't have to be in a innovation session. It is just about asking questions and normalizing that. I think plenty of time exists, but we just need to normalize doing it on a more regular basis.
But we need our supervisors and managers to normalize it.
100%.
Yes.
Yes. But that doesn't mean the time doesn't exist. That's what I'm trying
Right.
to say. It's a plenty. It's there, but we need to normalize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, there may be, but I also think exploration and curiosity takes a little bit of time. If you and I are having a moment of tension, we need to actually take the time to sit down to talk.
Sure.
If I'm struggling with a process or a system, I actually need to give it time to explore.
Yep.
So there is the moment to moment. It doesn't have to be the big event, but I do think we need to slow down enough to recognize when there's that rub piece rather than the blaming.
Yep.
And sometimes it's moment to moment, and sometimes it is saying this is important enough that we step back and allocate the appropriate amount of time or more time.
Yeah, I agree, Wendy, for sure. I think it's a both and in that situation. We want to do that, but we could literally, you and I could be walking to grab a coffee. You tell me about something that's going on. I can ask you a curious question. I'll literally walk away, and that gives you something to think about. So,
Yes.
Do you know for sure? Oh, actually, I don't know. I need to go and check. Right there, we just use curiosity in the workplace that might lead to something better. Yeah,
And you're talking about a mindset. It's a way of being all of the time.
I agree.
Yes, it is. It's very simple and easy to blame somebody and find fault. At least that's the systems we tend to set up in our world, in our court systems, in our judicial, in our schools, and in our workplaces. What if we set up a system that started with questions and curiosity, that looked at the system that permissions the behavior in the first place? What if we said our workplace is like a garden? We need to tend the garden so we get the results that we want in the workplace. And if we're not getting the results that we want in the workplace, it has something to do with the conditions of that particular garden. I think we need to wrap up there. Any final thought from either of you about a takeaway from this particular episode for our listeners?
I think the final thought for me is a reminder is to stay curious, especially in the face of a challenge.
Yeah.
It's easy to be curious when things are going well, but when you're encountering something difficult, be curious about it. Yeah.
Good point.
And to think about, I'm thinking of the quote, the obstacle is the way. When you encounter an obstacle, a barrier, you're slowed down because something is not working the way you want it to, whether it's a relationship or work, to actually say, oh, we can make things better. We do it by being curious, not by blame.
Thanks very much. For our listeners, when you walk in the door to your office today, if somebody does something that really bothers you, stop for a moment and ask yourself the question, what else might be going on that has permitted or permissioned this behavior in the first place? Instead of blaming the person, get curious about the culture and the conditions of your workplace. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
Looking for free resources, training, and consulting in the areas of leadership and workplace culture? Be sure to check out achievecenter.com. That's achieve, CENTRE.com.